Welcome back. We're back with the American Family Association Presents. Here in the studio with me today is Father Philip Eichner, president of Kellenberg Memorial High School in Uniondale, former president for 25 years of Chaminade High Schools. Chaminade High School, two very prestigious high schools, Father. You are considered by many as a real visionary in the area of education. First of all, tell us a bit about Kellenberg High School and Chaminade High School. What are these schools' mission and philosophies?
They are basically Catholic schools in the Marianist tradition. Marianists, we were founded in France in 1817, and we've spent most of our work in Europe, around the world, South America, Japan, Hawaii, in schools. And our school is characterized by just not academic training, but also training of the heart, value training and understanding the Judeo-Christian heritage and what we are about, and the riches of the church.
So the Judeo-Christian values that we spoke at the first half are alive and well at Chaminade and Kellenberg.
Yes, we make a very great effort to say that we are a Catholic school in the Catholic tradition. We believe in the Judeo-Christian ethic, Judeo-Christian heritage, and we are not ashamed to say that. Now, some people say, isn't that narrow? And we say, no, being focused is not being narrow. Being diluted by all sorts of other philosophies means that you have no philosophy and you're confused.
Right.
We are focused on the Judeo-Christian ethic, and we say, does it work? Does it work? Let's look at the results.
Okay.
Let's look at the results. Let's be result-driven and not ideologically driven. Does this work? What type of parenting works? What type of education works? What type of curriculum works? What do these students need?
Let's talk a little bit about that. I'd like you to answer some of those questions. How does a good school go about educating their students?
First of all, they have to have a goal. They have to have a philosophy. They have to know what's important, what's not important. They have to know that knowledge is the basis of wisdom. They have to realize that the child is subject to many different influences, but the child has to assimilate those. And the purpose of the school is to make the true and the good appetible. The true and the good. Make it appetible. Tasty. Tasty. And they choose what courses, what lines of study, what activities bring that out in the student. And that's a choice. Not everything does that.
Well, going back to, we talked a lot about the 60s was more emotional and a feeling. I'm not getting the sense that's what you're talking about on making it tasty. How do we get down to a curriculum? What are you making tasty for these students?
Okay, it's a good question. You know, if we allowed children to make their own decisions in education, if I were allowed to make my decision at 6 to go to school or not, I would still be out playing in the mud. I'd be illiterate today. So we have to know that the child will take dessert first, and if they're going to choose it, they'll take the line of least resistance. And then when they're 25, they'll come back and condemn you for, why did you know I was a sophomore? Didn't know what was good for me, and I took the easy way out. I believe that adults know more than children. All right? And the day I stop believing that, I'll get out of the classroom. And my job is to try to communicate the true and the good and find out what policies, what programs, what activities give that richness of the Judeo-Christian heritage of these kids. How do they experience it?
How do you impart it? Well, when you're talking about this, you know, we talked a little bit about the age of the information overload. In this age of the internet, Blackberries, etc., literature, mathematics, science, the classics, the arts, are they still relevant?
Absolutely, because they're the only things that educate. This other stuff may inform, but it does not educate.
Okay. So explain that. How do you get that structure?
We go back to two words that may be new to a lot of people who are listening to this program. That's the trivium and the quadrivium, the ancient Greek understanding of what makes an educated person. And they begin in the trivium, they begin with what is called grammar. Grammar means the basic structure of any study. Now, if you don't want grammar, you're never going to learn anything. What's the grammar of a car, auto mechanics? There are certain things that work.
Oh, so you're not just limiting it to language or English?
No, grammar of anything.
There has to be some basics.
Some basics. And then you have the step of the logic step, the dialectic, where you start making concepts of this. And the third stage is the rhetoric stage. Rhetoric meaning how you put this together, how you express it. Those are the three stages of all learning. They take discipline. They take work. When you do earth science, the grammars, you have to learn about 500 new words. Then you have to start putting it together, what it means, and then you can discourse. Then you can talk intelligently about this body of knowledge.
So, interesting. The mere fact that you are learning the grammar and the rhetoric of earth science doesn't necessarily mean you have to become an earth scientist.
Absolutely not.
You're now giving basic fundamental skills that whatever the person goes on to, they realize there's going to be a grammar, a logic, a rhetoric,
That's
or
right.
whatever I am going to try to specialize in.
There's a difference between education and a training. Training is good. We need training. But the basic thing is education. Education is not training. The classic understanding of education is what we call the liberal arts. Now, science is part of the liberal arts. Why are they called liberal? Because they're invented by the Liberal Party? No. They're liberal because they liberate you from your own myopia. We all tend to be myopic. We start with ourselves and end with ourselves. It's to break down the narrow confines of our own intellect and get us out into the real world. That's why they're liberal.
Okay.
And so at Chaminade-Kellenberg, we have 6 subjects for 4 years. We have no electives. They're not ready for electives yet. They have to get the basic grammar of all things.
What are the subjects? What are the 6 subjects?
English. English is the most important academic subject in school. Most important. Why? Because it's the tool by which you learn everything. Even if you're going into science, you're talking, you're speaking, you're using words. Using words all the time. We have 4 years of science. Now, everyone takes 4 years of science. That's right. Everyone.
Why is that important?
Because they have to know the earth. They have to know something about life. They have to know something about chemistry, and they have to know something about matter and motion. Otherwise, really, they shouldn't vote. How can you vote on ecology when you have the basic understandings of the science? They liberate you. You get to understand the sun and the moon and the stars and the earth. You get to understand biology. You get to understand the choices we have in science. Just fundamental high school courses.
Okay.
Take history. History, world studies, American history, world history, to know where you come from, to know the legacy that's put you where you are, and to know the mistakes that have been made. Mathematics, to understand the world of numbers, quantities. In a recent statement, Pope Benedict was dealing with some young kids. And he said, oh, you like this? You want to study the world? Kai says, well, you know, mathematics is the language of the universe. Stock and math teachers went up very high on that. Mathematics. To get you to think quantitatively, relationship, not because you're going to become a mathematician. So after that basic grounding, then you start to specialize into particular trainings.
Okay.
High school helps you on that, but don't say, well, it's at freshman year I want to be an engineer, so I'm just going to take science and math, and not going to take the other stuff. Well, you miss whole humanity. Or opposite, I'm going to go into the arts, therefore I don't have to take any mathematics or history or science. These broaden people, and we believe in that classical 4-year education. That's basically it.
Well, you mentioned those areas. What about character education? Where does that fit in at Catholic schools or at Kellenberg and Chaminade?
That's a very important point. And that type of education is most often caught, not taught.
Okay.
It's not something you can teach, but it's the whole atmosphere of the school. The role of the administration is to create an atmosphere which, when the person gets into it, there's almost an osmosis. Our motto, and one of our operating mottos, is CORE. CORE means heart in Latin. And our motto is Cor Unum Animum, one heart, one mind. But CORE stands for civility, order, respect. And we start the first day with that. You can't learn without a civility, you can't learn without order, and you can't learn without respect.
How does the osmosis come? And by the way, I have to say, it's working, because I've felt it. I've been over to Kellenberg for different functions. I've gone there at 5:30 at night, and it looks like a public school at 8 in the morning. It's still packed with kids, and there's excitement going on. How do you build that?
First of all, you have to have a faculty that believes in it,
Okay.
that really believes. The faculty is not just a purveyor of information. The faculty are characters. I hire a personality when I hire a teacher, not a degree. A personality, because it's through the prism of that person that these values are taught. These kids are vulnerable. They're open. And I tell each teacher, I said, you know, as this child grows up, on their soul will be a number of faces, and you'll only be one face on their soul. They may not remember everything you taught them, the subject you taught them, but they're going to remember the personality that you were. And that's why parenting is so important. The personality of the parent has an enormous effect on the character of the child. Our baptismal rite says, you are the first parents and the best parents, the best educators, the first educators and the best educators of their children.
Speaking of personalities in the classroom, you're the president of the school. Do you still teach? Do you still?
I still teach. All our administrators, everyone teach. Why? We all have to have our thumb in the pie. We all have to know what's going on. And basically, if you have a good philosophy, you don't need a lot of administration. If you have no philosophy, you need a lot of administrators.
What do you teach?
I teach senior Latin.
Latin.
I've taught that for about 53 years.
Why is that relevant today?
It's very relevant because language is important. Language is, Latin particularly, is the handmaid for English, to understand the concepts, understand English words. I tell my students they're very fortunate to be born into the English language. It's one of the richest languages of the world, has twice the vocabulary of some other languages, and has great variety and nuance. And half of it is Latin, say another 40% is Anglo-Saxon, and 10% is Greek. So to know those other languages, your vocabulary expands exponentially. And that's been proven for many, many times. Language is important. If I also may say, we have a group of students, they come in from school where there has not been much grammar. They know no English, they can't spell, the capitalization is poor, they have no sentence sense. Instead of giving them a foreign language, we'll give them a second period of English. They take 2 periods of English every day for 4 years. Has that made a difference? Enormous difference in them, because it gave them a heads up, an edge on language. And basically, even the SATs will tell you that the language factor was twice the predictive factor. And now the new part of the essay, which is writing, they'll say that's the major point.
Interesting.
In Kellenberg, it's 62 points higher in writing than the national average.
How many students at Kellenberg?
We're 6 to 12.
Grade 6 to
Grade
12?
6 to 12, and we're about 2,500, 2,600.
Chaminade?
Is about 1,700.
And that's 9 through 12.
9 through 12, yeah.
Yeah. How is enrollment? How are you doing?
We have no problem in enrollment. We have a big waiting list.
To get into these schools?
Yes, and we tell them we're not Some students don't want to come because they know we work. We work you hard, but we're nice. We're kind.
We talked about the Judeo-Christian ethic, how that's at the schools. The public schools are secular. There is no religion, and the government mandates that there's this. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with a secular education?
Well, their hands are tied because there are things called values. How are you deriving your values? We derive our values from the Old Testament, the New Testament, the teachings of Moses, the teaching of Jesus. How does a public school teacher derive values?
Well, I assume they would say that what you've just described is narrow, and that they're much more open-minded and multicultural. What's wrong with that?
Fine, because then who's going to say what's right, what's wrong? I'll give you an example. How this, a couple years ago, I had a young boy who was a junior, and he was cheating on the comprehensive exam.
Cheating?
Cheating, yeah, he's cheating. And I brought him into my office, and I said, you know, he said, yes, I was cheating. And I said, don't you feel a little remorse about that? You know, it's really not good to go through your life cheating. Taking somebody else's, don't you feel, you know, I expect him to say, yeah, I know, but it was the easy way out, and original sin, and I took the easy way out. No. No.
His answer was no.
Oh, no, no. He said, this is for my benefit, and I will do anything for my benefit. I don't feel any remorse of conscience on this. The only thing wrong was I got caught. For 2 hours, I tried to get him to see that society can't live on that type of, you know, dog eat dog. It can't live on that.
There has to be some fundamental value.
Some fundamental value. Now, where is he going to get that value? My value, it comes from 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. I mean, it sounds so fundamentalist, and it's not fundamental, it's just sane. In a public school, their hands are tied. Those teachers are very good teachers, but they can't do anything. They can't have any value judgments on anything. So, what happens? The least common denominator takes over. Now, do you have good teaching in schools? Yes, they'll allow nature to take over. And the smart get smarter and the dumb get dumber. So an honors program, they'll just have it by natural selection. And these kids get a wonderful education. The lower part, the disabled, they get a wonderful education. But the vast medium,
The middle.
85%, catch as catch can, because there's nobody to say, no, you can't do that, or you must take this course. See, we look at a student's ability and we put them where they have ability, not where they choose. Now that's against the Constitution, I presume.
Okay.
We put them where this is your ability, your God-given ability, and you're supposed to work up to it.
Public schools, private schools, a lot of people say, well, I got to send my kid to public school, it's free. And of course, it's not free. Your property taxes, your very high property taxes here in the New York metropolitan area, pay for the public schools. Now, if you want to send your child to Catholic school, in essence, you get to pay twice.
That's right.
Because you have to pay the tuition at the Catholic school, but they don't reduce your property taxes since you're not sending your kid to the public school.
That's right.
And so, why should a parent send their child to Catholic school? What should they expect for paying twice?
That's a very good question. I propose that to my teachers with this analogy. Imagine that the state has a monopoly. You have to go to school, state law,
Yep.
and they're going to give you a Ford. Everybody has to have a car. We're giving Fords out for nothing. If you want a Chevy, you have to really want it, and you have to pay for it yourself. So if a family wants a private Chevy, I have to be better. I tell my students that we have to
It's got to be a better car.
better car, we have to do more, We're in a competition with a state-funded monopoly, state-funded. So you got to be pretty sharp. You got to know what these kids do. What is our ultimate criterion? The ultimate criterion is what happens after they leave school. What happens when they go to college? First question I ask for a student coming back, were you prepared? First question. Because if you weren't, I'll make it tougher. Now, basically, parents understand that. Their parents say, I know values, and I know I don't want my kid just to go off the deep end, just to flake out, just to ooze into the unwashed middle that nobody cares about. I want my child to achieve. I want my child to be surrounded by people who are interested in him or her as a person. So it's that ultimate. People know that. That's why they buy it. Mm-hmm. It has to be better. Tell my teachers that it's got to be a better product. You got to put more time in. We don't have a salary contract. We have a salary agreement.
Well, what about public school is tenure? Is that tenure at your schools?
No tenure. No. You're there as long as you're doing a good job.
So there's some accountability.
Accountability, and we're on merit pay.
Tell me about that.
We about 20 years ago, we said schools go on schedules. One more year, you get an increase. And we said this is basically not healthy because we had some very creative teachers, and we were a school just starting out, creative teachers who were getting the same increment as the least motivated teacher. So we said that's not right. So let's say, can we have a system, a different system, motivational? And we have. We've had it for 20 years. The staff of 12 people, I'm not included, I'm the Board of Appeals, they meet in March and they go through every teacher, all the reports, all the interventions, all the guidance, the whole thing. They spend hours, days going through every single teacher. Evaluate the teacher. Almost like the Army, if you want to put it that way.
Very different from public schools.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
not hearing that in public
yes.
schools.
And then we'll assign them 6% increase, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, none. The principal writes this up in a whole letter for 110 teachers, writes it, reads the letter to the person. If the person has any objection, I'm the Board of Appeals. No one has ever objected. And what happens after 3 years, if somebody gets only a 0 or 1% increment, he knows why, or she knows why. You're not in it. You're just there giving your information and walking out. There's no interest in the kids. There's no interest after school activities.
So you're expecting a significant investment from your faculty.
Absolutely right. That's what we're paying them for, and we pay very good salaries. We have many teachers over $100,000. Okay. But I want investment. That's correct. That's actually the word.
Seems fair.
And we tell them that in the beginning.
It's funny just because, especially with the financial crises that we've been through in the country now, governments are looking to save money, and they don't go to the public schools and say, okay, there's got to be layoffs. All the motivated teachers get on this side, all the unmotivated teachers get on that side.
No.
It's, you're tenured, you've been here forever, you're staying here, the newest teachers, you're out,
right.
Motivated or not.
Yeah, see, no business would survive that way. Mm-hmm. There has to be a criterion of judgment. Just as I said for doctors or lawyers or architects.
I thought judgment's bad in our society.
Oh yes. Well, philosophy, truth lies in the judgment. When you say this is good, this is bad, this works, this doesn't work, 2 and 2 equals 4 or 2 and 2 equals 5, have to make a judgment. And that's the judgment you make in the 2nd grade. When the teacher says 2 and 2 equals 4, and the teacher puts 2 apples and 2 apples, puts them together, 1, 2, 3, 4, and says 2 and 2 equals 4.
Truth.
And little Johnny says, wait a minute, does that work for oranges? We got oranges. Does that work for pineapples? That work for little racing cars? Now that can go on forever until the child comes to what's called the principium intellectus, the principle of intellect, of sanity, and says, wow, 2 of anything plus 2 of anything equals 4 of something. That's a jump. A jump. Otherwise, he's still in the second grade now for 2 years, going through all the other possibilities. See, that's the basis, and that's judgment.
Okay.
What works? Doctors have to exercise judgment all the time.
We only have a few minutes left,
Yes.
Father. This concept of choice in education. You got the government monopoly. The public schools have to pay your taxes. If you want to go to private school, you got to pay twice. Fair? What's the alternative?
I think it's quite unfair. America is the only country that does that. Other countries realize that it's the parental role to choose the philosophy for their child. And to penalize people to choose the philosophy, not only the religion, but the philosophy for their children is somewhat tyrannical.
And the teachers' unions are invested in that. You know, they say, well, we can't have the government giving Catholic schools money, but the choice in education, the voucher system,
Surely.
that's not the government giving money
No.
to a Catholic
No.
school. That's giving it to the parent.
Parents.
And let the
Let them
parent
parent-
choose.
let them
It's the
choose.
parents' money. The parents get taxed. They have to send their kids to school. Shouldn't they have the freedom to
make
be
that
able to
choice.
decide which school?
That's correct. And some people will say to you, well, the parents don't know any better. Oh, yes, they do. They know what's good for their child. And some of the inner city schools in New York City, New York Archdiocese, have made an enormous difference. Enormous difference.
Lastly, we just have a minute. All we've spoken about, and I really appreciate your insights. Are you hopeful? What you're seeing in your school, what you're seeing in education generally about our current students?
Yes, I am hopeful. It's turning around. It's still slow in turning around. Sometimes we still believe there's a free lunch, that you can learn without pain, or without effort. We still have a lot of that floating around. All right, but I do believe that nature will out. Nature will come back and teach us you can't violate the laws of nature without.
Father
Pain.
Eichner, President of Kellenberg High School, thank you so much for joining us. We're at the end of our program. Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this helpful. If you'd like to learn more about what you've heard today regarding education and choice in education, please contact United New Yorkers for Choice in Education, P.O. Box 4096, Hempstead, New York 11551. If you want to learn more about the American Family Association of New York, please contact us at P.O. Box 203, Port Washington, New York. Our website, www.afany.org. Thank you for joining us. Thanks.
Good?
Excellent.
Good.
Sit tight for 1 minute. Just
Sure.
wrapping it up.